Welcome to the Snowbirds Expat Radio podcast, powered by the Snowbird US Day Tracker app. I'm your host, Gerry Scott, and my goal is to give you answers to your cross-border questions, to ease the stress of a cross-border move or extended trip, and to keep you up to date on all you need to know with cross-border rules and regulations. Now let's get on with the show. Well, welcome to the Snowbirds Expat Radio podcast. So Mike is our guest today, Mike from Greenback Tax. So Mike, welcome to the show. We look forward to hearing more about Greenback Tax. And so let's get started. Tell us more about what you guys are doing and a lot about your firm and your history at the firm.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Gerry. It's great to be here. So Greenback Expat Tax Services, we do taxes for U.S. expats primarily. So U.S. citizens living overseas are still required to file taxes with the United States, assuming they meet certain minimum income requirements. And then we also work with some foreign citizens as well who also need to file U.S. taxes for a variety of reasons. We've helped thousands and thousands of citizens over the years file their taxes from all corners of the globe, dozens, scores of countries, pretty much every country out there. We've helped someone file their taxes from. We have over 60 accountants we work with to make sure that we are up to speed and can cover everyone. And between the 15-year history of the business and the number of accountants we have, we've seen pretty much any scenario out there when it comes to expat taxes. The history of the firm, we have, the company's been around for about 15 years. It was founded by Dave and Carrie McKeegan. They were a husband-wife, are a husband and wife couple who founded the business. They were living overseas themselves and were frustrated by the process and figured there had to be a better way. So they built the business, and then I joined a little under 2 years ago as the CEO.
So understanding the unique needs of American expats, what are some of the things? Why is it so different than if you were living in the United States or living in Canada and you just had your regular tax preparer file those returns? Why is it so different?
Yeah, so great question. In essence, it's the same in the sense that you still have to file taxes with the U.S. government. And in a lot of ways, you're filing many of the same forms. The differences is that because of the relationships that the U.S. government has with some of these overseas governments or foreign governments, there might be some tax treaties or things that we can take advantage of as expats. So I myself, most recently, I've been an expat in several different countries. Most recently was in Korea. And in Korea, there are different allowances for some tax credits or foreign earned income exemptions that you can take as a U.S. citizen. So I was paying taxes in Korea to the Korean government and then also paying to the U.S. government. But it wasn't quite double dipping in the sense of I still got credits for the taxes I was paying in Korea. And it's really important to make sure that you get that right for a few reasons. Number one, you don't want to be paying full taxes to both governments. It's a quick way to go broke. But another reason is because the U.S. government in the past 10 years has passed a law saying that if you owe too much to the IRS, you could actually get your passport revoked or have other issues. So making sure that you do it accurately, correctly, on time, and working with a tax professional like us, if it's necessary, depending on your tax situation, it can be a tricky situation to make sure that you are completely up to speed on it. And also, I would say, as an expat myself, there's a certain feeling of making sure that you can get back to the home base, making sure that that passport is going to be accepted when you get back into the country. And so being able to file the taxes accurately and give you that peace of mind, it really makes a big difference when you're living overseas.
Now, how many treaties, you mentioned Korea, we know there's a treaty between Canada and the United States, but how many treaties does the United States have out there with all these countries?
Yeah, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I will say that no matter where you live, and I'll caveat this by saying that this is general advice and all of that. So definitely make sure you talk with your tax provider. But even in countries where there are not tax treaties, you can still get credits, the foreign tax credit or the foreign earned income exemption that I mentioned earlier. So I don't know exactly offhand how many treaties there are, but there are a lot of treaties out there, and every treaty is different as well. So it's a lot to keep track of as an expat, especially if you're moving between countries.
And I guess if you didn't have a treaty, if there wasn't a treaty with the country that you're living in as an expat, would be pretty expensive.
Yeah, it certainly can be. It's again, every treaty is different, so it's tough to paint broad strokes here. But fortunately, the FEIE and the foreign tax credit can certainly help with most Americans and their tax earnings. But there are also requirements that you have to meet to be able to earn those. You can't spend too much time in the U.S., for example. If you spend too many days in the U.S., then you're not eligible for some of those returns.
Mike, outside of tax, I know there's lots of other complexities that we have to kind of manage around because there's estate planning, there's cross-border inheritance and things like this. Do you want to mention some of the things that are pretty complex out there for expats living in other countries?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think obviously we focus on tax and that's our specialty, but there are, as you point out, a lot of other challenges for expats. So putting myself in the shoes of an expat, you're sitting in your house in the US and you're thinking about going abroad. You have to think about, first of all, a visa. Where are you eligible to go? What countries will accept you? And how long can you stay there? Can you work there? There's a lot of things to figure out in that area. Then you have to figure out housing, of course, and all that. And then once you get settled, once you're in there, you're planning to spend a long time, that's where you have to figure out your financial side of things, getting a bank account, figuring out taxes, both local country and US taxes. And then as you stay there longer term, that's where you think about some of these inheritance planning or having assets in multiple geographies throughout the world and trying to navigate the complexities of that, from trying to be as efficient with your taxes as possible, be as efficient with your earnings as possible, and making sure that your money can do the most. So I think that there are a lot of things to consider, and that's really where it helps to have great financial partners like Snowbirds, of course, and Greenback on the tax side to really help navigate some of those complex issues.
Now, are you seeing a lot of the tax, you're doing personal tax, but you're also seeing some of these business people, because they are required to live abroad to, be an expat, live abroad. And are you doing corporate taxes as well for these individuals?
We do. Yeah, we do both. I would say most of our clients are individuals, but we do have many also who are reporting on require the different business forms. Some of them just have side businesses. Other of them have larger organizations, and it can get complex pretty quickly. It's one thing if you own a business in the U.S. and you're living overseas. It's another if you have a business overseas and it's located in several geographies and it's co-owned by other foreign nationals, and it can get quite complex quite quickly. And so that's where, again, the more complex the situation, the better it is to have somebody who knows what they're doing to be able to walk you through that and really make sure your taxes are sorted out appropriately.
Now, when you do have an American person, American citizen that exits United States, do you guys ever go through any of the renouncing at all? Do you work with the immigration lawyers, or are you guys able to help with the renouncing if a person did want to give up their green cards or citizenship?
Yeah, definitely. We help on the tax side, and it is unfortunate that some people feel the need to renounce. And of course, there's lots of reasons why you might need to renounce. We've done studies in the past and have found that one of the biggest reasons for renouncing is because of that tax requirement. No matter where you live, you still have to pay taxes in the U.S. And so we do have some of our clients and Americans all over the world who say, you know what, I'm not planning to go back to the U.S. I'm going to go ahead and renounce that. And there's been an increase in that as well. There were over 5,300 renunciations in 2023, which was a jump from prior years. So we do see interest in that. And so at Greenback, on our side, we will work to make sure that all the final forms are filed appropriately, making sure that you are all squared away with the IRS so that there's no future issues or no lingering complications from that. So we can help on the tax side and get people squared away.
Now, what are some of the common mistakes and pitfalls that you find that people do make, and then all of a sudden they call Greenback to assist us? Please help us. We're in trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest and first one is a lot of people just don't know that they're required to file taxes. You think, I'm not in the U.S., why would I need to file taxes outside the U.S.? And the U.S. is one of very few countries who does have that requirement. And so we've had people who have lived outside the U.S. We have clients who come to us, and they've been outside the U.S. 10, 20, 30, even 40 years. We've had clients who've said, I've been out here 40 years. I just found out that I'm supposed to have been paying taxes all those years. So the first mistake or pitfall is just not paying taxes at all. And that can lead to complications down the line. A few other top pitfalls to mention. One is the FBAR. So the foreign bank account reporting. There's a form that you have to fill out to report any bank account that has had 10,000 US dollars or the equivalent currency or more at any point during the year. And you are required to report that. There's also some misunderstandings when it comes to the foreign earned income exclusion or the foreign tax credits, which I mentioned earlier, are very important to help expats reduce their tax burden. And so it's important to get those right. And then finally, the other one I'd mention for more higher income individuals is the alternative minimum tax, which can apply. It was implemented by Congress to ensure that high income taxpayers would pay a minimum amount of tax. And so making sure that you're compliant with that if you are a higher income individual.
You know, we talked about trends and what's happening out there. And of course, with, Greenback Tax was originally started a mom and pop, husband and wife team. And now they've grown to the point where they actually have someone like yourself to assist them in the growth. There must be an amazing trend and uptick of the services that are being provided like yourselves out there.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've seen an explosion really over the last, certainly the few years coming out of COVID. But even going beyond that, people are just becoming more interested in exploring the world and spending time. It's becoming easier to work remotely. It's becoming easier to keep in touch with family and friends when you're living overseas. And so we have seen an increase in the number of expats who are going over and intending to live indefinitely in the foreign country. And then also the digital nomads who are typically more transient, spending a few months here, a few months there while working remotely typically. So that's definitely a trend that we've seen. And 43% of expats are actually working remotely full-time or have adopted some sort of hybrid work model. So there are a significant portion who are enabled by the technology change to be able to go over and become expats.
So when you mention digital nomad, I mean, does that visa really exist, or is it just more of a term out there that's being used for expats?
Great question. So it varies by country, as you would imagine. There are countries who have seen this trend and really taken advantage of it. A lot of times these, not exclusively, of course, but digital nomads coming from the United States might have a higher average income than the local country. And so some of these countries are creating digital nomad specific visas where you can go and live for a certain amount of time working for your original business, working remotely. But you can live there, and there's different requirements from different countries. Some of them might require an investment, or they'll have a time limit. Maybe it's 1 year or 6 months. But they are trying to encourage these foreign citizens to come, to invest, or to just spend some of their income in the country and help the local economies.
Now, are you seeing that, the treaties between Canada and the United States, there's a lot of Canadians getting these E2 visas. Are you seeing a major uptick in that as well?
I haven't noticed that specifically. I'm not too familiar with that specifically, but I do think that anytime there's a change where there's an increase in the visa exchange between two countries, you'll certainly see an uptick in the number of citizens who are taking advantage of that.
Now, can you share some case studies with us, some of the more complex situations, and maybe that was more. It could be because there was a problem in someone, like the 40-year story you mentioned, that someone that didn't realize they had to pay taxes. What are some of the best stories that you can tell that you've been able to help people with Greenback Tax? Yeah,
absolutely. The one that we mentioned earlier, the 40 years, another 35 years who have just been overseas, and those are some of my favorite stories. And it doesn't even have to be that long; it could be even a few years, because they often come to us and so concerned. They're stressed out because, oh my goodness, I haven't been paying taxes. Is the CIA going to come busting through my door in Thailand and arrest me because I haven't been paying my taxes? Those are real concerns. Is my passport going to work when I go home? And so they come to us and we're able to reassure them it's going to be okay. We can get you sorted out. The IRS has a streamlined filing program where you file for the last 3 years, you get caught up, and then going forward, you're required to file annually, of course. But it's a bit of an amnesty program where you're able to get caught up and get squared away. And just seeing the stress levels go down and being able to help those sort of individuals are some of the best success stories. I think also figuring out some of the complex situations can be a lot of fun. Sometimes they can be stressful, of course, but figuring out the different treaties and situations, especially if there's a business with multiple locations or an individual who has a house they're renting out in the UK, but they're living in Spain, and then they have their original house maybe back in the US and lots of property and assets in different places. It's fun to be able to learn about people's experiences and help them navigate those complex situations.
Now, you mentioned that the IRS and the immigration, they really do communicate, because I would think that the average person would still be updating their passports, their American passports, on an ongoing basis. But are you finding that the IRS and immigration, the borders are really aware of these people that haven't possibly been paying tax for all these years?
So I can't speak to that definitively, but I can say that there's definitely been legislation and a focus on trying to collect as much income. The U.S. government wants to collect income and the fair share of taxes from all of its citizens, overseas or otherwise. And it is, as you might imagine, trickier for them to track and find the appropriate amount of income to withdraw or to expect from the individuals who are living overseas. Their employers are not usually, or in some cases, not reporting to the U.S. government. However, there are an increase in the number of treaties, for example, or agreements that these countries are having with the U.S. And the U.S. is increasing its efforts to try and find those people and get the right amount of tax from them. So it's not to scare anybody. It is a little bit of 1984 looking over your shoulder, which is why we encourage everyone to just get squared away with your taxes. It's not worth the trouble that you might run into down the road. But because they are increasing their efforts, and there's an increase in funding to the IRS as well to help find some of those people.
You know, something that's really come up this last couple of weeks, the amount of calls we received is more so about those Canadians and the Canadians that are spending a lot of time down the south, which are called snowbirds. We understand the tax implications. You know, if that 3-year rolling closer ties connections for them to avoid filing any U.S. tax returns. But do you ever see Canadians getting themselves in trouble and having to required to fill tax returns?
Yeah, I think I haven't seen anything specifically, but I think it's safe to say that especially if you're in the U.S., especially if you're earning income in the U.S. or purchasing property or anything that might put a quote-unquote target on your back, so to speak, getting you in the record system, in these financial systems, opening bank accounts in the U.S., that sort of thing, transferring money, making investments. I think that can always increase the likelihood that the IRS is going to start taking a closer look at you and make sure that you are doing everything appropriately.
Now, will you assist a Canadian when they do buy a home down the States for rental purposes or whatever? Will you assist them in setting up TIN numbers, all these types of things?
That's not something that I've seen in the past. That's typically would be you'd want a lawyer to help you with that and
okay.
With that. But we can, of course, help with the tax filings and helping everybody get squared away with that side. And also, if you have questions about tax structuring and making sure that your strategy is sound, we're more than happy to have you meet with one of our accountants and talk through that and just get a sense of what your strategy might be from a tax perspective.
Okay, and the last question is that how many Americans are living up in Canada that you're assisting right now? It must be a large number.
It is. It's I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but hundreds certainly, if not over 1,000. Canada is one of our biggest markets. Of course, proximity. It's a very nice place to live. I myself am just outside Detroit, so I'm only an hour away from the border from Canada. And it's a great place for Americans who want to go up north and spend some time with our Canadian neighbors. So we do have a lot of clients, both Canadian citizens and U.S. citizens who are living in Canada.
Now, would you be filing both the Canadian and the U.S. tax returns for them, or would you be working for a Canadian firm as well?
Yeah, so we file the U.S. tax side, and then we have a partner who we work with to refer Canadian citizens, whoever needs to file Canadian taxes, they handle the Canadian side of things. They're a close partner that we've worked with for many years.
Okay, and it's pretty straightforward. All these tax returns are all being done online now with SignX and DocuSign and the whole works. People don't have to be dropping by the Detroit office or anything.
Exactly. I will hesitate to use the word straightforward when it comes to the U.S. tax system, but yes, it's definitely simpler and easier now than it was, and we work fully remotely with people because they're overseas. You never have to meet with us in person. Everything's done over DocuSign. We have our own technology system where you upload documents, and everything's hyper secure. We're very focused on security and making sure that everything's protected, but also making it as easy as possible for the expats to process their taxes and get everything taken care of.
Well, there's so much to know. I always appreciate people like yourself, Mike, who are able to give us quite a bit of their time, and when we do have clients on the wealth management side, we're able to refer them to the proper people. So really appreciate the time you've given us today. And is there anything you want to add as well? I know this is so complex of expats and all the things they go through, but anything else you want to add that can help these people out, these expats living around the world?
Yeah, I think I would just say find your comfort zone and then get help for anything outside of that comfort zone. We're here to help if you want a consultation and just need some initial guidance. We're here to help you file your taxes and just completely take it off your hands. So find the right expert. And I would say the same with Snowbirds. If you're overseas and looking for investment opportunities and have some questions about that, find the right expert as soon as you exit your comfort zone. They can really be helpful and take a weight off your shoulders.
Well, I appreciate your time today. So good luck on the season. I don't know if you're a Detroit Red Wing fan. I know they made a few signings, but we're up here in Canada. We're very excited about the Canucks and what we're going to do this year, as we are for the last 60 years or 50 years, whatever it's been. So I truly appreciate your time, and thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Gerry.
Thank you again for listening to the Snowbird Expat Radio podcast. The best way you can support the podcast is to forward the episode to a friend, and please don't hesitate to like, subscribe, or leave a comment. Now, before you go, let me leave you with one of my favorite quotes. Be kind to all, the world is small.